or
It'll probably be on the last meeting,
Okay.
right?
the second to last will elect, and then the last,
When's gonna be the second to last one?
April 19th.
Yeah, we won't be here.
Oh.
We'll be in Kansas City.
Good.
I was saying,
Well, I can still text.
how it's 4 or 5, you want me to get started?
Yeah.
Go crazy.
Well, good afternoon. I want to thank you guys for inviting me and allowing me to give this little talk. I want to thank all my friends and family and teachers who gave me notes on this presentation. And without further ado, let's get started. So the topic of my talk is God and moral foundations. I'll attempt to show that 1, there is real moral truth. 2, that real moral truth requires a foundation. 3, that God is the best foundation for real moral truth. And 4, other foundations for morality fail and fall short. We'll get more into number 4 later in the Q&A if you guys want, but 1, 2, and 3 will be in the presentation. My talk will not cover specific Christian ethical practices, although you can ask about those during the Q&A. And this is not about inspiration and reliability of the Bible. Our focus here is on morality, ethics, and its ontological foundation. Its foundation in reality. Before we get into the weeds, you might be wondering, well, Jaden, what the heck are you talking about? Why does this matter? Can I just live my life however I want? And that's a good question to have. Is this really only for academic philosophers to argue about forever? Well, no. Ethics has real application and real effects on everyday life. In fact, society is built upon morality, and all the hot button issues today in politics and society are about ethics. Take abortion, gun control, race, immigration. All of those are ethical debates, are moral discussions. But you may say, well, as long as I'm a good person, as long as I treat people kindly, then it doesn't really matter. As long as it's lawful, it's okay. However, that raises the question for tonight's topic. What is good? What is a good person? How am I supposed to treat people? What does love and respect look like? These are all ethical questions. Lastly, you, right now, are a member of society. Society is telling you how to live. If you do X, Y, Z, you are a good moral person. But if you do A, B, C, then you are a bad person. And on top of that, people are asking moral questions about events happening around the world today. Questions like, is the war in Israel an ethical war? Is the war in Ukraine an ethical war? Should abortion be a right? Should you have the right to own a weapon? But you also have events happening in your own lives today. Should I trust this friend who hurt me? Is it moral to forgive someone? Is it ethical to have sex before marriage? Should I share this deep secret that could hurt my friendship? These are all ethical and moral questions that you and I are wrestling with. This is why it matters. Moving on, my first contention is that there is real moral truth. Real moral truth is transcendent. That is, it is binding on all people across time and across culture. In other words, it is objective. And you will hear many theists argue for objective morality, and this is what they mean by it. They mean that it is binding on all people, it's across time and across culture. Next, real moral truth is independent of what humans think and believe. So for example, if Nazi Germany had won World War II and had brainwashed everyone into believing that the Holocaust was good, it would still be evil in reality, despite people believing it to be true. Lastly, real moral truth proposes that there is a real, objective right and wrong, a real, objective good and evil. For example, 2 plus 2. 2 plus 2 has one answer, and it's 4. All other answers, like 5, 72, negative 131, are wrong. Likewise, if real moral truth is true, then there would be right or correct ethical principles or answers to ethical questions and situations because it has an objective nature. Before demonstrating that real moral truth is indeed true, we're going to first discuss a basic philosophical principle, and that is our intuition, our philosophical gut reaction. And this philosophical principle is that you should trust your intuition. You should trust your philosophical gut unless warranted evidence says your intuition is wrong. For example, if I were to say genocide is ethical, you would rightly think I am wrong without giving a lot of thought to what I said. You should trust your intuition because the burden of proof is on me to show you that your intuition is wrong and that you should favor genocide. Likewise, we have a strong intuition that there is an objective and a real good and evil. And skeptics of real moral truth have a burden of proof to overcome this intuition. And to demonstrate that real moral truth is true, we're going to go over a brief argument, and this is the argument for moral progress. And this is how it's stated. If moral progress is true, then real moral truth is true. Moral progress is true, therefore real moral truth is true. Basically, this argument tries to demonstrate that if societies have improved ethically or morally, then there must be a real standard of morality. Slavery, for instance, was seen as morally good a couple hundred years ago. It was believed to be good. But over time, through argumentation and reform, many societies recognized the horror and evil of slavery and worked to rid themselves of it. And we see this as a good and moral improvement that society has made. In fact, many people today are arguing that we should still reform, we should still improve to rid ourselves of current evils or past evils that affect us. However, if there is no such thing as an objective right and wrong, an objective good and evil, then no one can say society has improved or that society has had any objective evil. If there is no transcendent evil in reality, then society and its practices cannot be labeled as evil. The work of the abolitionists during the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement in the 50s and 60s cannot be seen as moral progress because they are not fighting against objective evil. You cannot progress towards a real standard. You cannot correct or reform society if there is nothing to reform to. And such a notion runs contrary to our philosophical gut. And if moral relativism is true, the idea that there is no objective good or evil, that morality is relative to the culture in which it presents itself, to its cultural discussion, then moral progress would be seen as going against the cultural morality rather than conforming and correcting the culture to the real moral truth. Additionally, famous reformers like MLK Jr., abolitionists, feminists, Gandhi, and others cannot be seen as progressing or reforming society because they oppose the cultural morality. But such a notion runs contrary to our philosophical gut, and the burden on proof is on the skeptic to show that our philosophical gut is wrong. Seeing how there is real moral truth, we're going to move on to how this shows God's existence. And if there is a real moral reality, which we've already established, that is independent of human thought, then there are only two ways to ground morality: in a person or in a non-personal thing, or an impersonal thing. In fact, you will have atheist and theist philosophers can both agree that there is real moral truth. However, they disagree on the foundation for morality. You have famous philosophical atheists like Eric Wielenberg, They will say that real moral truth is grounded in a non-personal law. They will say that there is a moral law, but no lawgiver. And this moral law necessarily exists, and it's just there. However, there's a couple problems with this view. The first problem is that morality is between people, not impersonal objects. I do not have a duty and an obligation to an impersonal object. Take, for instance, a speed limit sign. A speed limit sign is a non-personal thing that tells you what you should do. But I do not have to follow the speed limit sign. I can go however fast or slow I want. I commit no immoral action by going against the speed limit sign. The sign itself is not a person, and it in of itself has no authority. But the speed limit sign does represent the law of the land that was passed by people. Additionally, if I was pulled over by an officer, I am obligated to obey him because he is a person with authority. If I do not obey his commands, I commit an immoral action against a moral authority. Furthermore, why should I follow a non-personal law? What kind of authority does it have over me? It seems that there is no reason to follow and obey a non-personal moral law. Because if I break the law of the land, there are people with authority who will see to it that I am held accountable. However, if I break a non-personal moral law, there is nothing there to hold me accountable. A non-personal moral law would also describe what this moral law is. It would tell you what is good. But it wouldn't prescribe how you should live. It wouldn't tell you why you should do something. It would tell me that a moral law, it would simply tell you what is moral. But it wouldn't tell you why you should be moral. It doesn't tell you how you can be moral. But a person, on the other hand, can describe and prescribe a moral law. There's an authority figure, and this person can hold me accountable. And this person can tell you how you should do something, why you should do something, not simply what is. From this, we can see that morality needs a personal foundation. So if morality is transcendent, objective, timeless, independent, and personal, then it needs to be grounded against something that is transcendent, objective, timeless, independent, and personal, which is what we would call God. So therefore, God exists. And this is the argument in its philosophical form. 1, real moral truth is true, which we've already established. If real moral truth is true, then it needs a personal grounding. 3, real moral truth has a personal grounding. 4, God is a personal being. 5, God is the best explanation to ground real moral truth. 6, therefore, a personal God exists. Again, if there is real moral truth, and it requires a personal foundation, then a personal God exists. Now, we will briefly look into a couple counter-arguments and some objections to my couple of arguments. The first and most famous counter-argument that is brought up is from moral disagreement. People will say, well, many cultures disagree on morality, and even our culture within itself disagrees a lot. And if there are real facts about morality, then we should see more agreement than we do. But since so many people disagree, then morality is obviously subjective and has no objective meaning. Now, while this is a very popular argument, it is faulty. Disagreement does not necessarily show that something is subjective or that something is an opinion. For example, historians would disagree as to what Napoleon's motives were. Scientists would disagree as to which specific theory of evolution is correct. Physicists will disagree as to whether black holes exist or not. Even philosophers will disagree on everything. Yet just because people disagree in those fields, it does not follow that their field of study has no objective nature on reality, history, or science. Next, I agree that there is moral disagreement. However, there's also moral agreement across cultures. For instance, cultures across the world agree that murdering an innocent human life is wrong. However, we may disagree as to what an innocent human life is. Additionally, cultures also agree that some virtues, like courage, standing in the face of adversity, looking down the enemy, is better than cowardice. Finally, disagreement implies real moral truth. In order to disagree on something, there has to be something real and objective to disagree on. You cannot say there is no objective good and evil, and then say someone is wrong with their morality. You cannot say there's no objective good and evil, and then turn around and say, well, your view of morality is factually wrong. And the same thing goes with math problems. You can't say that there's no answer to math problems and then say, well, 2 plus 2 is 4. It's not 5. To do so is to contradict what you stated earlier, and if you're contradicting yourself, you don't have a full and fleshed out view on reality. Another popular misunderstanding is that everything is in black and white, and that there is no gray area if there are real moral truths. However, real moral truth can demonstrate that there are gray areas. Take this famous Steeler dilemma. So a man was fired from his work, and he has to feed his family. And if he doesn't feed his family's going to starve and probably die. So on the way home, he's feeling really bummed out, and he sees a really nice bakery. And he thinks to himself, I could steal from the bakery and provide food for my family. If he steals, he does a good moral thing by feeding his family, but he does evil by stealing, and vice versa. If he does not steal, he does a good thing by not stealing, but he does evil because his family's probably going to die. As you can see, there's both of these good things, both of these evil things, and they're just head-on collision with each other. But that's a gray area. We don't necessarily know what to do. There's a gray area. And there's a gray area because there's an objective and real morality. There's an objective black and white. And there's also probably instances in life where there are some questions that are black and white, but you get to a specific degree or level and it becomes a gray area. For instance, modesty can be a black and white issue. You either are modest or you're not modest. But the level or degree of modesty can be a gray area. Should you just cover your private parts? Or should you be clothed from head to toe? Or is it somewhere in the middle? That's a gray area. And lastly, some people will accuse the moral argument with circular reasoning. Circular reasoning is where you presuppose your conclusion is true, or that you try to use the same reasoning to justify your conclusion. However, my moral argument tries to argue from a deductive or straightforward approach. First, we argue for real moral truth, in that it requires a personal foundation, and that those two pieces of evidence show or demonstrate that God is the best explanation for morality. We've also discussed how we do presuppose that that we can trust our basic philosophical gut. But this argument does not presuppose God. Having addressed common arguments and having presented my argument, I conclude that God is the best foundation for morality, and we open it up to Q&A. Thank you. Thank you.
was well thought out with many points. It's hard to come up with questions from it. I really like the scenario with like the guy who's like, do I steal from bakery
Yeah,
or let my family die?
yeah,
Cause like that one, you don't want your family to die.
yeah, and that's a gray area to have. Because like both things are good, but both things are evil. So you can just feel the tension in that. And if relativism is true, it's just what the culture talks about, and there's no real objective right or wrong, we shouldn't necessarily be like wrestling this hard with it. Because I could steal from it, and it would be like, well, that's just what my culture says, or it's what I think I should do. And you can't really tell me, well, no, you're wrong, because there's no real foundation to say, hey, you can't do this. So, yeah.
Did you, like all your information, did you like get a lot of it from different sources, like,
Yeah, so there are different versions of moral arguments that famous Christians give. Mine's a different and unique one. There's Inspiring Philosophy on YouTube. He goes more into depth on different theories on ethics and why real moral truth is the best one. And then he presents a different argument. C.S. Lewis and his Mere Christianity, that's a very basic but also like easily understandable kind of moral argument he presents. And then William Lane Craig, he presents, of course, a different argument. But those are the three sources that I've really pulled from. So you could also be devil's advocate if you really wanted to.
Boo.
it's another question, not devil's advocate one, but,
You're good.
so those moral gray areas,
Yeah.
do you have any suggestions on like, if back to like the bakery or
Yeah.
killing your family, what's the best way to be like, which one's the?
So, two things. One, there's two different views. You have one view that says you should choose the lesser evil, and you have another view that says you should choose the greater good. And so that would be the first thing to ask if you're facing with an intense dilemma like that, is to be like, okay, do I want to do the lesser evil or do I want to do the greater good? Second thing is that most problems in our life are not going to be between good and evil. It's going to be between good and good, or good and gooder, or worse and worse. So, like for instance, like I had to choose whether to do school online or in person for next school year. I mean, both are good options, both are good things. So I had to choose between good and good. And that's another kind of gray area that we see more in life. So, did that help? Did that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. That's also important for later in life when you think about it. It's like, okay, do I want to stay in Kansas, or do I want to move somewhere else? Do I want to move to a different state, or do I want to move out of the country? Like, both could be good options to choose from, and they're not necessarily evil. You just really have to ask, okay, so what is better for me or my family?
Yeah.
So,
I heard you mention earlier about how people all the way across the world hold the same like moral beliefs as us.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true with people of different religions too, who believe in like different gods? Like,
Yeah.
and how would their beliefs be different from another like religion, followers of a different religion? I guess?
So I think there are, from what I've understood and from what I've done, there is general basic principles that everybody agrees on. So Muslims and Christians and Jews will all agree, like, okay, we should love our neighbor, we should not murder an innocent human being. But when you get further into the weeds, a Christian will say, well, a gay person, LGBTQ, whatever person, they should not die, okay, even if they have done wrong against God's divine commands. Muslims, on the other hand, will say, no, gay people should be killed because they have violated God's moral commands, divine commands. So for me, I see basic general agreement, and then when you get further into the weeds, people will disagree as to how morality applies, or who morality applies to.
It's kind of like a tree where
Yeah.
it branches off.
Yeah, it very much branches off.
Yeah.
Does this argument matter what God?
Does this argument matter about God?
No, what God?
Like which?
Which God?
No.
Like,
this-
I could argue for Zeus.
Um,
This.
so this moral argument would simply argue for a monotheistic eternal God. Because we concluded that there is a personal God and that morality is transcendent of time and of space. So it can't really be grounded in a finite God. Does that make sense? Okay.
Hello.
Hey. I'm Jaden. What's your name?
Jason.
Jason?
Hmm?
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
He gave a presentation about
Yeah, so I gave the presentation. I don't want to do it all again. But I argued that there's real moral truth. Real moral truth is transcendent. It's binding on all people across time and culture. It's independent of what humans think. And it says that there's a real objective right and wrong, a real objective good and evil. And then I argued that this kind of morality needs a foundation. And since morality is between people, not immaterial or non-personal agents, that God is the best explanation for morality. So that's everything in like 2 minutes.
Okay. It's a good summary.
Thank you. I really hope I could summarize everything.
I was gonna ask, do you think that someone who's like an atheist or
Mhm.
non-religious could still have moral beliefs just as strong as like religious
Yes,
people.
yes. So that kind of goes into the issue of epistemology versus ontology. Epistemology is how we know things. How do I know this? Ontology is on reality. What is reality? And I think it's very possible that, I don't think it's possible, I think that atheists can be moral without knowing God. And the reason I think is that because everyone is made in the image of God, and that the moral law is written on our hearts. We have a conscience that tells us what is, that helps us, tells us what is right and wrong. And there's also several people who do know God, and they do lots of evil things. So I think it's, yes, atheists can be, just can do good without knowing God. I don't think that they have a philosophical foundation for that, but I do think that they can do good without knowing God.
I think another explanation someone could come up with would be like the society around us
Mhm.
conditions us to believe certain moral things
Yes.
also.
Yeah. So do you mean more like society tells you what's right and wrong, or do you mean more like society is the standard, like it helps you learn what's right and wrong?
I think both.
Bit of both.
Yeah.
So I would agree that society helps us learn what is good and evil. I would have problems with saying that society is the creator of moral truths, because you have society A that says, hey, this is okay, and society B says, no, that's not okay. And there would be no way to say which culture is correct or which culture is wrong. And then you also have like problems of like, okay, societies can't not judge each other for whatever evils you think they committed. So that's the problem I would have with that. Does that make sense? Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
I think something important to consider is the fact that society conditions you to believe in like a reward system,
Mhm.
because each major world religion, they believe in the idea that if you do good, you will be rewarded, and if you do bad, you will be punished.
Mhm.
So religion operates in that kind of like punishment and reward system, whereas
Yes.
if you're an atheist, you don't have that punishment or reward system, and if you do good regardless and avoid from doing bad, you're just doing good despite knowing that you probably won't get a reward out of it.
Mhm. Yeah. I would agree. Most religions have a punishment reward system. I think that Christianity has that as well, but we also would say your character matters more. The development of who you are as a person. So not so much as rewards and punishment, but more of like, who are you and are you doing God's will? That would be my little two cents. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any other questions?
Are we looking at Christianity in this, or
Not-
just religion in general?
Not specifically Christianity, but you can ask questions about Christianity, because I am a Christian apologist, I'm a Christian philosopher. My main talk was about religion in general, but if you want, we could talk more about Christianity. So.
Is anyone still thinking? Or,
Not really coming up with anything,
Okay.
I'm trying.
then I guess we could, talk about what we want for our next topic. The one we come up with will be like the last one though, since next meeting will be April 19th. And we'll do like elections that day. But we could also do a topic, and then for the last like 15 minutes, do an election type